Hello everyone, I'm Eva from Brown Eyed Clicks, and today I'm going to show you how to use Google AdWords experiments. AdWords experiments can be found within the AdWords interface, and they're really easy to use, and they're a fantastic tool to try out new ideas that you have before you actually have to apply them to your original campaign. So, just before we get started, in order to run an experiment within AdWords, you first have to create a draft, and then that draft is going to get converted into an experiment. And this is what I'm going to show you now. So let's get started. Log into your AdWords account and then go to the campaign for which you want to create an experiment. So in my case, I'm going to choose this campaign over here. And then located within the left-hand sub-navigation all the way down here at the bottom, you can find an item called Drafts and Experiments. That's what you want to click on. And then you want to click on New Draft. Remember, you have to create a draft first, and then we're going to convert that into an experiment. So let's set up our draft. First, we're going to name our draft. Choose something that you can identify quite easily, something descriptive. So in my case, let's say the original campaign is called Lollipop Kittens, and I'm going to give it an identifier that shows me what am I testing. So I'm going to try out a new bid strategy, maximize clicks. And then you can add additional identifiers. Let's say you're going to run this experiment throughout February. So I'm going to add Feb 18. Great. Click on Save. And this will now create an exact copy of the original campaign that I was just in. Okay, so one thing to note here is that this is really just a draft. It's not an active campaign. Don't worry if you have to stop here and you have to come back later. Your original campaign is still running, but this draft here is not, and it's not serving any ads at this stage. If you have to come back later, here's where you will find your drafts. Once you log into your AdWords account, you will find all your drafts in the left-hand navigation all the way at the bottom. Alternatively, you can go directly to the campaign for which you created the draft, and then in the sub-navigation on the left-hand side, you will find all your drafts and experiments for this particular campaign at the bottom here. Okay? So next what we want to do is we're going to make the changes that we want to test in this draft. So in my case, like I said, I'm going to try out a new bid strategy, and the bid strategy is maximize clicks. So what I'll do is I'm going to settings, and then bidding, change bid strategy, and here I'm going to select maximize clicks, and I'm going to hit save. So this draft now has a different bid strategy than my original campaign. This is going to be the only thing I'm going to be changing. You might want to be careful with making too many changes within your draft, because otherwise you can't really identify whether a different performance of your experiment is due to one variable over another. Okay, so I've made my change. The next thing I want to do is I want to convert this draft into an experiment. Wherever you are within your draft, you will always find this ribbon at the top here, which will tell you what the status of the current draft is, what kind of campaign it is, and the original campaign this draft refers to. So here you will find a button called Apply. Click on that, and then you're going to get this little pop-up here asking you whether you want to apply these changes to the original campaign or whether you want to run an experiment. So we want to run an experiment. Select that and click on Apply. Now you can set up the testing parameters. So you can name your experiment. Again, choose something that's descriptive. You could just use the exact same name that you chose for your draft. So in my case, I'm going to use Lollipop Kittens, maximize clicks, February 18. Then you can choose your start date. You can, for example, set up experiments that are going to start in the future. For me, this is the date of today, and I'm happy to start this experiment today. Then you can select an end date. By default, the experiment will run for 1 month. I usually choose not to set a defined end date, because that gives me more flexibility. I can run the experiment for however long I want, and obviously you can stop it at any point. For the experiment split, typically for normal A/B tests, you will want a 50% split. The experiment split decides how much of your campaign's budget is going to be allocated to this experiment. That means the original campaign and the experiment are going to share one budget. And in addition to the budget share, This experiment split also indicates the percentage of auctions in which your experiment will participate. So 50% means in half of your auctions, your experiment will enter, rather than the original campaign. You can, of course, choose a lower experiment split, for example 30%, if you're highly uncertain about the experiment's positive outcome, and if you can't afford to lose any conversions or have any performance drops. Okay, so once you're happy with your setup, you can click on Save, and then AdWords will show you the status of your campaign experiment. So you'll see here that the status says it's still creating. That usually only takes a few minutes. Once it's active, it'll change to active. If it's a really big campaign, it can actually take several hours, but usually that shouldn't be the case. Great, so your experiment is up and running now. Next, I'm going to show you where you can monitor the performance of your experiment. So I'm going to use a different account for this, where I've got experiments that have already been running for a little while. So once your experiment is running, it will actually show up in your normal campaign tab. It'll have a little icon here at the front identifying it as an experiment, and you can also see it in your left-hand navigation, also with the experiment icon. Alternatively, you can always find all your experiments at the bottom here in your left-hand sub-navigation under Drafts and Experiments. So to understand exactly how your experiment is performing against your original campaign, go into your experimental campaign through one of the paths that I just mentioned. So I'm just going to use the normal campaign path here. And then once you're in your experiment campaign, AdWords will show you all your comparison stats at the top here. So there are a few important things to bear in mind here. AdWords will start showing a little blue asterisk underneath the metric for which it has collected enough data. So the asterisk indicates that enough data has been collected to be saturated, and the data you can see here is actually statistically significant. You can choose the different metrics here in the drop-down for which you want to compare performance against your original campaign, and you can hover over your results to actually see more details. What you want to do is you want to keep monitoring your experiment until you can see conclusive results. This might mean that you have to be quite patient. Depending on your campaign's performance, its size, its traffic volume, it can mean that an experiment can last just a few days, or it can actually last weeks or even some months. So be patient. Once your experiment has run its course and you're certain about the results, it's time to end your experiment and apply your changes if the outcome was positive. So you go into your experimental campaign, and what you want to do is you want to click on Apply in the top right, and then AdWords will ask you whether you want to apply the changes you were testing here to your original campaign, or whether you actually want to convert this experimental campaign into an entirely new campaign. Usually you want to update your original campaign. I'm not going to do this just now because this experiment is actually not over yet, so I'm going to click on Cancel instead of Apply. If your experiment hasn't shown a positive outcome, so you actually do not want to apply the changes you were testing, you can still end your experiment by simply clicking on End Now. After you've ended your experiment, regardless of whether you applied those changes or not, you'll always be able to find your historical experiments within your left-hand sub-navigation under Drafts and Experiments. And from here, you can remove them, or you can simply just leave them for future reference. You can go back into your campaign even if it's ended, if you need to look something up again, if you're not certain about an outcome anymore for reporting purposes, whatever you might need that for. Take note that the status here then won't be active anymore, but it'll say ended. Okay, I hope you found this useful, and if you want to learn more about AdWords, just subscribe to my channel or go to my blog browneyedclicks.com. Thanks for watching.